So here's a wild one for you. How can the very same animal be a complete nightmare, like a devastating plague in one country, but in another it's hailed as a hero, an actual ecological miracle worker? Well, it all comes down to a story about perspective, the environment, and, believe it or not, one really, really clever system. Okay, so get this. On one side of the planet, you've got Australia. 200 million rabbits are just tearing up the landscape. That's 10 times the human population. They're officially a destructive pest. But then you look over at China, and they've spent the last 3 decades deliberately bringing in over 4 million rabbits. And not for food. They were for this kind of crazy experiment right in the middle of a desert. And what happened? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into.
All right, so to really get what a miracle this was, you first have to understand the villain of the story, and that is the Kubuki Desert in China. Now, this wasn't just any desert. It was this expanding monster. They literally called it the Sea of Death because it just kept swallowing up good, fertile land relentlessly.
The problem here is something called desertification. It's a fancy word for when perfectly good, farmable land just turns into a barren desert. And for China, the Kubuki was one of the worst-case scenarios. I mean, one of the biggest and fastest-moving threats like it on the entire planet. And the speed? Wow. We're talking 500,000 acres of usable land gone, swallowed by sand, every single year. I mean, just try to picture an area bigger than London just disappearing under sand, year after year after year. The situation was, to put it mildly, absolutely desperate. So naturally, China threw everything they had at this thing. We're talking massive government projects, building sand control stations, planting who knows how many trees. But nothing worked. It was like trying to stop the tide with a bucket. The Sea of Death was just too powerful. The sand kept on coming, and honestly, hope was running out.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a turn. This is where we meet our hero, a local entrepreneur, a guy named Wang Wenbio, steps up with an idea. And let's be real, it was an idea that pretty much everyone thought was completely insane. He was going to fight this unstoppable desert with a tree, a simple willow tree, and he was betting his own money on it.
And you know what? The strategy was actually pretty clever. First, he planted these fast-growing willow trees in big grids, and to keep the saplings safe from the wind, he built these neat little checkerboard patterns out of dry shrubs. But the real genius, the absolute game changer, was the choice of tree itself. A willow tree's roots can dive down 300 feet to find water. Plus, the wood was valuable. You could sell it for paper and furniture, so there was a business model here too.
And for a few years, it actually seemed like it was working. The trees were holding the sand down. But then, a huge new problem popped up. See, to make that wood valuable, the main trunk has to grow really thick. And to do that, you have to constantly cut back or prune all the little new shoots. Now imagine trying to do that by hand for thousands and thousands of trees in the middle of a massive desert. It wasn't just hard, it was going to be bankruptingly expensive. The whole project was right on the brink of complete failure.
So, just when it looked like the desert was going to win, our second hero makes its grand entrance. And it's not what you'd expect. It's an animal famous for, well, for eating stuff, not for growing it. Yep, the Rex rabbit. And this, right here, is the moment that a crazy idea turned into an absolute revolution.
Okay, this is where the genius of the whole system just clicks into place. The rabbit wasn't just a one-trick pony. It had 4 jobs. First, it was the perfect pruner. It would nibble on all those new willow shoots, which forced the main trunk to grow thicker and more valuable. Problem solved. Second, it was a little fertilizer factory on legs. Its waste enriched the sandy soil, making it fertile. Third, it was an accidental gardener. The rabbit would spread undigested grass seeds in its droppings, basically planting new stuff all over the place. And fourth, it was an economic engine. That valuable Rex rabbit fur created a brand new source of income for all the local farmers. So what this created was the heart of the whole solution, a perfect, self-sustaining cycle. It wasn't just about planting trees anymore, you see? The rabbits took care of the trees held down the sand, the rabbit poop fertilized the ground, and the whole thing made money. It was ecology and economy, hand in hand, working in perfect harmony.
So did it work? What happened over the next 30 years? Well, the results are, honestly, they're just astounding. The impact of this rabbit-powered system went way beyond just the environment. It totally transformed the entire region, literally turning worthless sand into gold for the people who called it home. First, let's talk about the environmental win. It's staggering. Over 6,250 square kilometers of that desert, we're talking about a third of the entire thing, has been turned from yellow sand back into green, living vegetation. The Sea of Death was actually becoming an oasis.
And that's not all. This green recovery directly lifted an estimated 100,000 people out of poverty. It created jobs, good jobs, in farming, forestry, raising rabbits, all in a place that people used to run away from.
And if you want a hard number, get this. The average farmer in that area now makes around $9,600 a year. Think about that. These were families who were on the verge of losing everything, abandoning their homes to the desert. Now they're actually building wealth because of it.
So that brings us back to our original question. Why was the rabbit a plague in Australia, but a total hero in China? And the answer is really just one word: system. See, in Australia, the rabbits were just dropped into an ecosystem with no plan, no purpose. They were an uncontrolled disaster. But in China, they were a crucial part of a carefully designed machine, an eco-economic machine, where their natural habits served a specific, super beneficial purpose.
Now, you'd think the story ends there, right? Desert restored, people are happy. But no, this incredible cycle got one final, almost sci-fi power-up. Because what do you do with thousands of square kilometers of sunny, reclaimed desert land? Well, you build one of the most incredible solar farms on the planet. That's what.
Check this out. This is the Zhengma Solar Power Plant. It's built on 6,000 acres of that restored desert land. And here's the crazy part. From space, its 5 million solar panels are laid out to look like a giant running horse.
And no, that's not just for show. It's actually in the Guinness World Records as the largest solar panel image on Earth. How cool is that? It's like this giant symbol of green energy rising right out of the sand. And just like the rabbits, this solar farm is a multitasker. Of course, it generates a ton of clean energy. But the panels also create shade, which means less water evaporates from the ground, letting lush grass grow underneath. Plus, the whole structure acts as a massive windbreak, cutting the local wind speed in half and stopping the sand from blowing around. It's another perfect system where every part helps the other parts.
And this is where the story comes full circle in the most perfect way. So you've got all this grass growing under 5 million solar panels. Who do you get to manage it? Who's going to eat it all? You already know the answer, don't you? Yep, the Rex rabbits. They were brought in to eat the grass, fertilize the soil, and complete this ultimate, futuristic, eco-economic loop. It's just perfect.
So I think the real takeaway from the Kubukchi story is this. Maybe our biggest problems don't need a single, magical, silver bullet solution. Maybe what they need is a clever, self-sustaining system. This story proves that when we design with nature instead of fighting it, we can turn a sea of death into a garden of life. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other so-called plagues out there are just waiting to become miracles? If only we can find the right system to put them in.
So